Boker Tov.
You're stupid kid.
Okay, let's get started.
You're the good brother. Everything. Baruch Hashem, everything. Hashem help you.
Okay, let's get started. So we are on Daf Zayin. So yeah, we're jumping into the middle of a sugya here. So this is not the quickest amud. So okay, let's a little bit of recap. So we are looking for a mikor. This is the agenda here. We're looking for a source. Aseh is doche lo taseh of karet. So what's this? Karet. We aseh lo taseh we found. We want to find a mikor that even aseh is doche lo taseh of karet. So the Gemara brought a braita, and in the braita there was a bit of a back and forth. The question was, you have on the one hand a chiyuv of Beit Din to put someone to death. You have on the other hand an isur of melacha on Shabbat. So the Gemara the Braita said first, maybe the mitat Beit Din overrides Shabbat. And the Gemara said, well, maybe it doesn't. And then the Gemara said, maybe it does. And the Gemara brought a pasuk. What was the pasuk? It said, "B'chol lo tivaru esh b'chol moshevotechem," and we learned moshevotechem means Beit Din, means a moshav Beit Din. Lo tivaru, they also cannot do mitat Beit Din on Shabbat. So the Gemara says, you see, you need a special pasuk. That means that in all other cases, when you have an aseh against Shabbat or a lo taseh of karet, so aseh would be doche lo taseh of karet. Just by mitat Beit Din, we have a special thing to teach me that the aseh of mitat Beit Din is not doche lo taseh of karet of Shabbat. That was the potential proof. Let's jump back to Vav Amud Bet. We're gonna have to go a little bit fast just to make timing. But let's jump back to Vav Amud Bet, where it says Amar Rav Simi bar Asi. 3 lines up from the bottom. So Amar Rav Simi bar Ashi, Hai Tana lo mishum da'ati aseh v'dachi lo ta'aseh. This whole braita that we wanted to bring a proof from, right? What's the whole proof? The whole proof is if we need a special limud to teach me that mitat Beit Din is not doche Shabbat, that means in general I would have thought that an aseh is doche lo ta'aseh karet. So Rav Simi bar Ashi says no, that's not the case. That's not what I would have thought. The whole reason that we need a special limud here is not because aseh is doche lo ta'aseh karet, ella mishum demaiti mikal v'chomer. I would have learned from a kal v'chomer. I would have had a kal v'chomer to learn that you should do mitat Beit Din on Shabbat. What was the kal v'chomer? Hachi kamar. Mani mikayim mechalalei amot yumat. I have a pasuk of mechalalei amot yumat. You cannot be mechalal Shabbat. I would have thought that's talking about b'shar melachot chutz mi mitat Beit Din. I would have thought that's talking about other melachot. But Beit Din is allowed to be mechalal Shabbat for killing someone. Aval mitat Beit Din dachya Shabbat. I would have thought that mitat Beit Din is doche Shabbat. Why so? Uma avoda shehi chamura v'doche Shabbat. When it comes to avoda of the Beit HaMikdash, that's so strict that it overrides Shabbat. How do I know? You're allowed to do avoda on Shabbat. Torah says that you have to bring certain korbanot on Shabbat. Ritzicha doche ota. Mitat Beit Din overrides avoda. Shneimar, it says in the pasuk, Me'im mizbechi tikachenu lamut, that if a kohen is about to be doing the avodah, he's there near the mizbeach, about to be doing the avodah, you take him out and Beit Din kills him, even if there's no other kohen to fill his position right now. So mitat Beit Din overrides avodah, and avoda overrides Shabbat. Right, again, if there's a kohen that's working in the Beit HaMikdash, Beit Din will take him right out of there and put him to death. That overrides. Beit Din has a chiyuv to kill the kohen. Let's say the kohen murdered or something. So Beit Din will take him and put him to death. That overrides avodah, and avodah overrides Shabbat. So mitat Beit Din should override Shabbat. So Shabbat shenitchet mimnei avodah eino din sheteh retzicha doche ota. Shabbat that is it's weaker than avodah. So for sure mitat Beit Din should override Shabbat. That's the kal vachomer. So now, very important. The Gemara, if you remember, in the Braita, we had a back and a forth and a back. We said first, Beit Din should, mitat Beit Din should, we said Beit Din should kill on Shabbat. And then we said, no, they shouldn't. Yes, they should. So what's the back and forth? So, umay o eino. What's, when the Braita says, no, maybe it's the other way around. How are you going to argue with this? So you have a kal vachomer. What's the other way around? What's the back and forth? Like what's the thought process of the Braita that it's saying first you should, Beit Din should, and then no, maybe not, no, maybe yes, and then we have this pasuk. What's the back and forth? So the first thought is you have a kal vachomer. If it overrides avoda, for sure it should override Shabbat. And the Gemara says, "Oh, my oeno the kamar, hachi kamar." Kivurat met mitzvah tochiach. The Gemara says, no. Maybe Beit Din, mitat Beit Din should not override Shabbat. Why? Because I have a pircha to this kal vachomer. I have something to knock out this kal vachomer. Why? Met mitzvah. That shedoche et avodah, met mitzvah overrides avodah. Meaning, if there's a kohen doing avodah, so meit mitzvah, if there's a meit mitzvah, there's nobody else to bury this body, the kohen goes and takes care of it. Vein dochet Shabbat, but meit mitzvah doesn't override Shabbat. If there's a meit mitzvah, you don't bury it on Shabbat. You wait until Motzei Shabbat. So you see, just because something overrides avoda doesn't necessarily mean it overrides Shabbat. It's true, avoda overrides Shabbat, but you can have things that override avodah that don't override Shabbat. So you can't. So that this kal vachomer, that since mitat Beit Din overrides avodah, it should for sure override Shabbat. It's not a good kal vachomer. So now, what's the response to that? What the Braita said went back the other way and said, well, maybe they still should do mitat Beit Din on Shabbat. So what's the other back? So Hadar Amar Kivurat Med Mitzvah Tidche Shabbat Mikal Vachomer. Then the Gemara said, no, you know what? Actually, Med Mitzvah, you should bury a Med Mitzvah on Shabbat. How do you know you don't bury a Med Mitzvah on Shabbat? Maybe Med Mitzvah should be buried on Shabbat too, from the same Kal Vachomer. Uma Avodah Shehi Doche Shabbat Kivurat Med Mitzvah Doche Ota. If Avodah overrides Shabbat and burying a Med Mitzvah overrides Avodah, Mi V'la'achoto, from that special pasuk of V'la'achoto, that's the source that we learn that Met Mitzvah overrides Avodah. Shabbat she'enchem mnei avodah eino din shetehe kivurat met mitzvah doche ota. If Shabbat is pushed off by avodah, so for sure bearing a met mitzvah should push off Shabbat. Talmud lomar lo tevaru. So then the pasuk comes in. So basically, the Gemara is explaining the thought process of the Braita. The Braita said maybe Beit Din should administer death penalty on Shabbat. Then the Braita said maybe not, maybe yes. What's the maybe they should, maybe not, maybe yes? So maybe they should because we have a kal vachomer. We'll learn if avoda is doche Shabbat, for sure it should be. I'm sorry, if avoda is doche Shabbat and mitat Beit Din is doche avoda, for sure mitat Beit Din should be doche Shabbat. That was why we would assume that yes, Beit Din should do death penalty on Shabbat. Then we went back and we said, oh, maybe maybe it's not a good kal vachomer because mid mitzvah doesn't override Shabbat, but it overrides avoda. So maybe mitat Beit Din also shouldn't override Shabbat and override avoda. Then the Gemara said, well, how do you even know that? How do you know that mid mitzvah overrides doesn't override Shabbat? Maybe mid mitzvah should also override Shabbat. That was the back and forth and back until we have a pasuk. The pasuk says that lo tevaru esh b'chol moshvotechem. Okay, so now once we have this explanation, we have no source for aseh doche lo ta'aseh sheyesh bo karet. Now the Gemara is just going to discuss what we had originally assumed that maybe this would be a source, but the Gemara doesn't bring it as a definitive source. The next few lines are kind of like almost like parenthetical. So the Gemara says that, meaning it's like according to what we had originally thought, let's work out the back and forth, but we're not necessarily going with it. It's just a havamina that we originally thought. So says the Gemara, according to that which we had originally thought, that the whole discussion here and back and forth of the Braita was because aseh doche lo ta'aseh. My o'eno de ka'amar. What does it mean what's the back and forth? What's the thought process of the Braita when it says no? Maybe it doesn't mean that maybe Mita Beit Din doesn't administer the death penalty on Shabbat. Maybe yes, maybe no. What's the back and forth? So Hachi Kamar. Mani mekayem mechalei amot yumad b'shar melachot chutz mitat Beit Din. Mitat Beit Din dachi Shabbat. Maybe Beit Din should administer the death penalty on Shabbat, and Mitat Beit Din is doche Shabbat. Why? Da'ati aseh v'dachi lo ta'aseh. Because Mitat Beit Din is an aseh. Shabbat is a lo ta'aseh. We know an aseh overrides a lo ta'aseh. This is again all parenthetical, all what I would have thought. So then, what's the response to that? It says Amor. No, Mitat Beit Din is an aseh. Shabbat is a lo ta'aseh. So the Gemara says, according to what I originally was thinking, this would be the back and forth. The first step is aseh is doche lo ta'aseh. So Mitat Beit Din should be doche Shabbat. Then Hadar Amar, then the Gemara responds and says, Amor da'amrinan da'ati aseh v'dachi lo ta'aseh greda. Lo ta'aseh sheyesh bo karet mishmad leide dachi. That which we say aseh overrides a lo ta'aseh, that's a regular lo ta'aseh. Over here, Shabbat is karet. So, great, you want to tell me aseh doche lo ta'aseh? The response is, this is karet. So, aseh is not doche lo ta'aseh of karet. Hadar Amar, then the Gemara goes back and argues against that and says, Atu aseh, de doche lo ta'aseh, et lo ta'aseh, lav lo ta'aseh chamur mineh. The Gemara says, 1 second. Any aseh versus a lo ta'aseh, what's more strict? An aseh or a lo ta'aseh? What's more strict?
Lo ta'aseh.
Lo ta'aseh, right? Lo ta'aseh, you get there's malkut, you get punished. Aseh, if somebody doesn't put on tefillin one day, you're not going to take him to Beit Din and punish him. Nothing's going to happen. Lo ta'aseh, he steals, I don't know, he does something, there's a punishment. Maybe not stealing because he could give it back, but it's a lavanita klase. But whatever, some other, I don't know, he eats pork, so there's a punishment. So a lo ta'aseh is always more strict. So already aseh doche lo ta'aseh is a chidush. It's something that is you would not necessarily think on your own that an aseh should override a lo ta'aseh. So once it's a chidush, the veka'ati aseh v'dachi, and an aseh overrides a lo ta'aseh, even though a lo ta'aseh is more strict, dachile, mali chumra zuta, mali chumra rabba. Once an aseh, which is seemingly weaker than a lo ta'aseh, overrides a lo ta'aseh, which is stronger, so, okay, why do I care if it's a little bit stronger or a lot stronger? Meaning, let the lo ta'aseh have karet also. It doesn't matter. If aseh is doche lo ta'aseh, it's doche lo ta'aseh. So therefore, Talmud lomar lo tivaru. Therefore, the pasuk says lo tivaru. This was all explaining the havamina of the Gemara, that this Braita had to do with aseh doche lo ta'aseh. But what we're coming out with is it doesn't have to do with aseh doche lo ta'aseh. It has to do with kal v'chomers. Now, I'll just mention side point very quickly. The Rabbi Kiva Eger here quotes a Ramban. This is a very important Ramban in the idea of aseh doche lo ta'aseh. The Ramban gets a little bit into the depth of aseh doche lo ta'aseh, and the Ramban on Chumash sometimes gets a little bit into like inyanei Kabbalah and Sod and like the depth of things. But basically, the Ramban explains that what's the whole idea of aseh doche lo ta'aseh? So the Ramban explains, beautiful Musar idea. The Ramban says that mitzvah aseh is representative of the midah of ahava. and lo ta'aseh is the midah of yirah. Because if someone he wants to give and do to his master, that's showing ahava. That's the mitzvah aseh. If somebody just refrains from things that his master doesn't like, that's yirah. That's lo ta'aseh. So the Ramban says ahava always overrides yirah. Ahava is preferable, is superior to yirah. That's the depth behind the concept of aseh dochel lo ta'aseh. That even though a lo ta'aseh is more strict, but doing an aseh shows ahava, and that ahava overrides, is greater than, is stronger than yirah.
Forgiveness too.
Okay, so let's try to get to the bottom of the amud. So we're back to square one, clean slate, brand new, right? Same question, but brand new take at this question. What is the source for aseh dochel lo ta'aseh of karet? We said this Braita is not talking about aseh dochel lo ta'aseh. At the end of the day, this Braita thought there was a kal v'chomer, and then they said there's no kal v'chomer, and back and forth. So it has nothing to do with aseh dochel lo ta'aseh. So what's the whole source for aseh dochel lo ta'aseh? So ela itzrich salka da'ata chamina tehave hai eshet ach davar shehaya bichlal v'yatza min haklal lelamed lo lelamed al atzmo yatza el lelamed al klal lo yatza. Okay, so the Gemara says, I would have thought to learn from eshet ach. What's eshet ach? Is brother's wife. Brother's wife is one of the arayot, right? So eshet ach, there's a concept in the Torah. We have the Yud Gimel Midot Torah Nidreshet Bahem. 13 different ways of limudim, of learning things from drasha, different types of learning things. So the one of them is something that was already in a category, and then it was pulled out, and we said something about it. Davar shaya bichlal v'yatza min haklal lelamed. We pull it out of that general grouping to teach us something. That thing which you teach doesn't only apply to it; it applies to everything in the grouping. Davar shaya bichlal, it was in a grouping. V'yatza min haklal lelamed, and it was pulled out of the grouping. So lo lelamed al atzmo yatza, it's not coming to teach you something about itself. Ela lelamed al kol haklal kulo yatza. It's coming to teach back to the entire klal. So we want to try to apply that rule here to Yibum. How? So we want to say that the eshet ach, brother's wife, is an erva, is one of the arayot. So it's in the list, in the grouping of all the arayot. His daughter, his sister, his brother's wife, his father's wife, his father's sister, all of those arayos, mother, sister, whatever. So it's in the grouping, and it pulls it out to tell you there's a heter of yibum. So it was davar shaya bichlal, it was in a grouping, v'yatza min haklal lelamed, and it was pulled out of the grouping to teach us something. So lo lelamed al atzmo yatza, it's not coming to teach something about itself, rather it's coming to teach us something about the entire klal. So the heter of yibum should relate back to the entire klal. That's what the Gemara wants to suggest. And how do we know such a concept exists? So, Detanya. Davar shehaya bichlal, v'yatza min haklal, v'chule, ketzad. So what's the prime example of this? So, Pasuk says, v'hanefesh asher tochal basar mizevach hashelamim v'tumato alav. If somebody is tameh and he eats korban shlamim, okay? So the Gemara says that he gets karet, he gets punished, he gets karet. That's what the pasuk says. So the Gemara says, I already know this. Why is shlamim different than any other korban? V'alo shlamim bichlal kodeshim hayu. Shlamim was in the klal. It said any kodshim. Shlamim was included in all kodshim. V'lama yatzu. Why is shlamim being singled out over here? Lahakish elehen v'lomar lecha. Ma shlamim miyuchadim kodshei mizbeach. We learn from shlamim being singled out that just like shlamim is something that's kodshei mizbeach, meaning there's different types of kodshim. There's kodshei mizbeach, which are animals that are made kadosh specifically to be brought as a korban, to be brought on the mizbeach. There's also kodshei bedek habayit. A person could donate whatever he wants. He could donate an animal to the Beit HaMikdash as a donation, and not for a korban, just to the fund of the treasury of the Beit HaMikdash. So I would have thought any kodshim, if a person eats it, gets hana from it, he's chayav karet. If he's tameh and he eats it, says no. It's only kochei mizbeach. We learned from shlamim. Shlamim was included in kochim, but it was singled out to teach me that just like shlamim is something that's kochei mizbeach, it's something that's brought as a korban, so too, everything in the general rule, something that's brought as a korban. Wow. Welcome back. So afkol kochei mizbeach. Also, all things that a person would get karet for eating when tameh is kochei mizbeach. But kochei bedek habayit, he won't get karet for. So yachu kochei bedek habayit. It's coming to exclude kochei bedek habayit. Hachanami. So we want to say the same thing over here. Eshet ach bichlal kol ha'arayot haita. Eshet ach, brother's wife, was included in all the arayot. Velama yatzta. Why was it excluded? Why was it singled out? La'akisha le'av lomar lecha ma eshet ach sharia af kol arayot nami sharia. Coming to teach me that the same way that eshet ach has a heter of yibum, so too it's coming to learn back to the entire klal, all the arayot, that they also have a heter of yibum. Meaning the Gemara says, this is what I would have thought. This is why I need a special thing to teach me, a special drasha to teach me that there's no yibum by arayot, because I would have thought to learn from esherach to all the other arayot, davar shaya bechlal v'yatsa min klal, it's learning on the entire klal. So the Gemara says, no, not true. Not true. You can't say that over here. Midami. Hatam klal beisur prat beisur. Over there, by the case of the kochim, the klal was beisur, meaning there's an isur of eating kochim when tameh. And then the prat, what was excluded, is also telling me there's an isur by shlamim. So it's saying asur to eat kochim when tameh. This is asur to eat shlamim when tameh, and you get karet for it. So the Gemara over there, it's unnecessary. So it's coming to teach me that to the rest of the klal that you get karet also for anything that's kochei mizbeach. But hacha klal beisur uprat beheter. Over here, the klal is all the arayot or isur, and the prat is beheter. So that's not a davar sheyatsa mina klal. It's only yatsa mina klal when the klal is isur, and this is singled out again as isur. But if the klal is isur and there's a heter for this, you don't really learn that heter back to everything in the klal. This is similar to a different type of limud. Halodami ella ledavar sheya bichlal veyatsa lidon bidvar chadash. This is more similar to the following rule. We have another rule that davar sheya bichlal, something that was in a general category, veyatsa lidon bidvar chadash, and it was excluded and singled out to teach me a davar chadash, to teach me something entirely new. So she'iyata yachol lachziro lichlalo ad sheyachzirenu lecha hakatuv beferush. You cannot plug it back into the klal unless the pasuk does it for you. Okay, so you know what? Maybe the next. Okay, no. Let's continue. Let's go a little bit further. So this rule is like this: that you have a davar sheya bechlal. You have something that was in a klal. There's a klal of all arayot over here, right? Eshet ach, achorisha, this, that, the other, right? All the arayot are all in a klal. You have something that is excluded from the klal. Eshet ach, it's excluded to teach me a heter of yibum. So davar sheya bechlal, v'yatsa lidun bidvar chadash. Eshet ach, brother's wife, was inside this klal of arayot. V'yatsa was excluded to teach me it's something which is a chidush. So I ata yachol lachziro lechlalo, you can't put it back into the klal to learn from it unless the Torah specifically indicates that you do. Right? I ata yachol lachziro lechlalo ad sheyachzirenu lecha hakatuv beferush, until the pasuk explicitly puts it back in the klal. So over here, it's something that was excluded, and the Torah never put it back in to be able to learn the heter to everything else. Therefore, the heter of yibum is limited to brother sister and not to any of the other arayot. So therefore, you don't have this. We don't. What we were trying to say that it's davar sheyatsa bechlal lo lamed al atzmo yatsa ela lamed klal kulo yatsa, that it's coming to teach back to the entire klal. It's not true. So how do we know this rule So that of davar shia bechlal v'yatsa lo mevaret chadash yata reshai lachziro l'chalal sheyachzirno l'chatuv beferush ketzad. So v'shachat et hakeves b'mkom asher yishchat et hachatat. So this is talking about a korban of asham of a mitzorah. Okay, so somebody who has sarat, part of his process of becoming tahor is he brings a korban asham. So pasuk says that you shecht this sheep in the same place that you shecht the korban chatat ve'ta'olah b'mkom hakodesh. Ki kachatat ha'asham hu lakohen. The pasuk says that the chatat is like the asham. So shein talmud lomar kechatat ha'asham. The Torah doesn't need to tell us the chatat is like the asham. Ma talmud lomar kechatat ha'asham. Why does the Torah specifically tell us the chatat is like the asham? Lefi sheyatsa asham mitzorah lidom midvar chadash beboan yad uboen regel. The asham mitzorah has a chidush that comes with it, that the blood is sprinkled, the blood is put on the person's right thumb and his right toe and earlobe. So yachol lo yehed ton matan damim ve'emurim. I might think that when it comes to the matan damim ve'emurim, where the blood is placed and where the limbs are placed, it would also be different. Like mizbeach. Talmud lomar ki kachatat ha'asham hu ma chatat teuna matan damim ve'emurim lagav mizbeach af ha'asham teun matan damim ve'emurim lagav mizbeach. Okay, this part we could redo tomorrow. B'ezras Hashem. I'm going to give ample time to put on tefillin. B'ezras Hashem, tomorrow we'll continue from the bottom here. Not such a long.